Hello, and welcome to Enhanced Information Solutions webinar on Pi event frames and electronic workflow. I'm Jack Audie, EIS's Director of Sales, and your host for this webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all registrants. So here's the agenda for today. First, we will have a poll, followed by an introduction of EIS and today's speakers. We'll then describe eDatasheet and OpsTrakker, followed by a demo and questions. So before we get started, here are some Zoom basics. To ask questions, please click on the Q&A icon. We will answer your questions either in the dialogue or at the end of the webinar. At the conclusion of this webinar, you will be presented with a survey. Please complete the survey so we can properly gauge the value of this webinar and your opinions. Today's speakers, myself, I'm EIS's Jack Audie. I'm EIS's Director of Sales and Partner Relations. I've had over 23 years at OSIsoft and worked with many of you over the years. Kevin, can you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jack. My name is Kevin White. Been with EIS for roughly 3 years. Main background in operations, especially on digital implementation on the shop floor. So a lot of the focus of what I like to work on is helping operations work better and smoother. Pretty agnostic as far as when it comes to different platforms. However, what I'm going to show you today is an engineered solution that is both easy to use, easy to implement, and replicable across multiple problem sets in multiple industries. So it's really an exciting thing to show. Thanks, Jack.
Okay, thank you. Okay, before we get started, let's do a quick poll. I'd like you to please answer the poll, and we'll share the results.
Okay, let's get going with the polls. 1. We use Pi event frames. 73% of you said yes, you do. 28% do not. We do manual creation of event frames. 35% of you said yes, 40% no, 25% of you said no, but you do need to. You have a need for manual data entry to Pi. 70% of you said yes, 30% of you said no. Okay, thank you very much.
So who is Enhanced Information Solutions? Well, we were founded back in 1994, and we're in Stillwater, Minnesota. And we started off with MES consulting and implementation services. We do a great deal of work with Pi. We also do some Seek services, a lot of work on OT cybersecurity. And we have 2 basic products. We have eDatasheet, which is a new product for manually entry of data into Pi. And then we have an OpsTrakker product. It's a product we've had for a while. It's an electronic logbook with workflow and with a complete audit trail. We'll see both of these today. So we are a global company. We have offices here in the US, Toronto, Canada, San Juan, Puerto Rico, Dublin, Ireland, Mannheim, Germany, Pune, India, and Istanbul, Turkey. These are some of the services that we provide, along with traditional Pi services, but we do a lot of work around AF development. A lot of our core individuals here have an operations background, so we do more than just traditional Pi system administration, but we also can deploy out asset framework, migration and backfilling of Pi, batch to event frame migration, and complete validation services, as well as cybersecurity. So eDatasheet, a quick description of eDatasheet. What it is, it's manual entry data into Pi. And the idea here, it's simple, easy to access, easy to use. The interface is very intuitive to use. The idea here, again, no training is required. It's very familiar, similar to a spreadsheet. We incorporate and we utilize asset framework and Pi tags, and you'll see that. Our functional architecture is we connect to the web to Pi through using the Pi Web API. And our eDatasheet server has a SQL Server backend, and our web client communicates with the eDatasheet server. So only the eDatasheet server utilizes the web API to communicate to Pi. We don't expose that we don't expose Pi to the web clients. OpsTrakker software. This is EIS's product for electronic workflow and forms. It's very heavily used in the life sciences industries. So the idea here, workflows are assembled in building blocks that can be templatized. And as they're executed, you'll see this during Kevin's presentation. You can see as things are executed manually and they're signed off with a system of record being stored in Pi. Okay, with that said, we're going to proceed on to a demo. Kevin?
Yep, and I'm sharing right now. Tell me when you can see my screen, Jack, and I'll move on.
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. So before we get into, we're actually going to do two demos because there's a lot of really great functionalities that can exist. And from the poll, I could see that quite a few people on the phone call have what I would call Pi core maturity, right? If you're getting into event frames, no longer are you just having the data lake. You've now put things into your asset framework in such a way that you're identifying assets and important key critical components that you're looking at. Along with that, if you're using event frames, you've now noticed, hey, I can use those to tell me things when they happen, either batch times, maintenance downtimes, grade changes, all those different things. You know, you can now use that real-time process variable to start and end a capsule of time as an event frame. If you're at that point with the Pi core, you know also how to visualize that on a screen, right? And so you know how on a Pi Vision screen you can pull up and in this instance, right? And you can see for the assets we're talking about what event frames occurred. Now, the portion of where this engineered solution addresses this issue is, firstly, how do you get that information for those triggers? And right now, everyone is mainly stuck in the fact of if it is a live Pi point, sure, I can use that. But we know across operations that there's a lot of data silos, either digital systems which aren't connected in, or in a bunch of our cases, right, paper systems, right, logs, things that we'd like to know in context with the process variables going on, but they're sitting in a filing cabinet somewhere. Or worse, and we've all done this, taking that filing cabinet worth of data and then putting it into an Excel spreadsheet and then manipulating that in a semi-historian way without all the other information that does come with a Pi core historian data set. So you have, how do I bring this data together? Because I know it's important. And how do I put it all digitally on the same place? The other thing is, once we identify that something's incorrect, how do we have an operator not just take an action, but take a standard action? And how do we say that what information is being entered is actually contextually important right now or not? We're finding in multiple industries that the turnover in workforce is leading us more into, we have new operators who may not have that institutional knowledge to understand how close towards a spec requires an action, or if going past the specification is a fail or a I should do something about this. Right. So the more we can put tools in place on top of what we already have for data now drives the information, the contextualization, and then really to close the loop in a standard way, a workflow engine to tell you something's not right. Let's fix it. So you'll see all this kind of coming out in the two presentations. This first scenario, and this is the one you see up on the screen, is a Pi Vision screen, right? You can see the URL. What I've got is embedded on there is an HTML page that goes to what we call eDatasheet, the product that Jack was talking about earlier. You'll notice under equipment, I can actually click and see multiple pieces of equipment which may have an eDatasheet, because each piece of equipment can also have multiple forms associated with it. Think of these as log sheets. You can see it kind of already just looks like an Excel spreadsheet. Very comfortable for the operator to use, right? You can see you can set it up with a couple of different things in here where you can see historical data entered. You can see data for the day that's been entered is in gray. And let's say that for this scenario that I'm an operator and I'm taking samples on the Wiffy skid. Now, the Wiffy skid probably has an output reading, maybe a PLC HMI of some sort, where I can go through and daily I'm taking logs because I know if my aerobic bacteria gets too high, I actually need to connect this offline rig to clean through it. Okay. So daily I'm taking these logs because I know I got to keep an eye on some of these things. I'd like to trim them out, but it's paper logs. Right now, I'm just trying to get all the data in digitally. So it's as easy as clicking the plus sign and it gives you a timestamp. Now, this timestamp is actually variable. So if I took this sample and I hit time now for an ad hoc reporting, but I actually did it, let's say 10 minutes ago, now my timestamp will match up to when this data actually should be historized, not to time now. That flexibility really allows you to never miss a point or go, that's close enough, right? A lot of the times when we're trying to align events, I know when we're mixing different silos of data together, you kind of have to like squint your eyes and look just right at it to go, oh yes, that must have happened at roughly the same time. By us digitizing these data points, they're actually laying over that same other real-time data in our historian that we have in here. So now I'll go through and let's say this is what I'm reading from the screen. And let's say I happen to get a bacteria of 12. You can see as soon as I click off the block, it lets me see that that is an out of spec based on the boundaries I've put. So I'll continue through and I'll do 5,000. So if you notice at this point, nothing is saved yet. Okay, the block hasn't grayed out. So if it's today's data that's been entered, you'll see it grayed out like the block before it. However, you do see red blocks around it. A couple different things. If 12 is the correct answer, then I can submit an out of spec. However, this also allows me, as operators tend to do, especially operators with hands my size, fat fingers. So if I actually hit a 00 on there, I don't want to put that bad data in there. And you'll see it changes to green when you click off that block. And to write it to Pi, you simply hit the little save disk. And it says data saved successfully. So now these data points are written back into your Pi historian. Now you'll notice that all of a sudden this link showed up. And I'll tell you what happened behind the scenes on this is with the ability of Pi Asset Framework being able to run analytics, then you can set up triggers. And with these triggers, it's really nice in Pi Vision because you can make these triggers into multi-state. So actually what's happening here is there's just a multi-state that says, don't show this link to me unless this is out of spec. The reason we put that here and the reason you didn't see it before is because we want the operator to see something different and drive towards it. In reality, our best real screen should be a green thumbs up or a red thumbs down. And that should then tell us if everything's running right and if not, what we need to do and how to fix it. So from this, my operator will now see, oh, I need to take a Wiffy sanitization, right? So I need to hook up my off rig. And what it kicks you into now is OpsTrakker. So this is what was shown earlier. It's a workflow software. The really nice part about this, and I'll talk through what you saw just kind of flip through in a second, is the ability here to see these single modules. Now, I'm not a computer programmer. I need tools that I can put in place easily and make sense to me. I don't have time to learn JavaScript or Python or some of these other languages that I know a lot of people are really comfortable with. I need something that I can look at a template and say, okay, I need to do these types of events. OpsTrakker sets it up as such. You can actually see as you click on each step, it tells you the kind of step there is. Now, I'll tell you without getting into too much detail, there's a finite number of these step types. And that means that everything you would need to do can be done in some combination of these step types, whether it's checking an attribute, whether it's in the next step here, you'll see is a REST client. So this is actually an API call back to my Pi system that says, tell me what my current bacteria is. Now, since I just wrote that number into eDatasheet, remember it was 12, that's what it pulls up through the system. But you'll notice they each happen in bite-sized steps this way. You can actually make them occur automatically. So if you're pulling information that you don't need the operator say, yes, is the information I need, you know it needs to get fed, you can have those steps automatically update. And you'll see little green checks in them. That'll put you on your next step, which says, hey, your bacteria levels are out of spec, right? This is what it currently says you were. Here's your maximum bacteria. So you need to do the hot sanitization procedure. So you can already see it's reading from Pi, right? And from there, it says you're out of spec, here's what you need to do. Now, again, if you think this is incorrect, it's easy now, you close this out, you go back to eData sheet and you record the proper number, you're no longer out of spec. So I'll say this, I'll acknowledge it. Now, again, since, and Jack brought this up, since this tool was originally made and heavily utilized in the pharmaceutical and life science world, it really follows 11 CFR requirements for digital signatures. So you'll see you can put multiple different levels of signature control, review control, what types of signatures, security groups, all of that is extremely configurable and easy to use within this. We're assuming on this point that we do need some kind of signature to say, yeah, I'm actually going to have to go in and do this corrective action. Again, you'll notice you can actually use PIN numbers. You can use all kinds of things. Okay. So I've already shown you 3 different types of steps. One being a get check attribute, the next being a REST client, and this one being an actual recording of those values. And then I have a signature with it that said, yeah, I acknowledge that. So now we actually have a step that is nothing but manual steps, right? This can be from your SOP, from an OEM manual on how to set this up. It can be cut and paste. It can be a picture of it. And actually, if you do already have digital documentation, it can be a link towards that. So you can pull in your SOPs and not have to worry about your revision control. So you can see this will tell us how to set it up, what we need to do, and then start the skid. Now, the thing about this is when I connect this skid, I don't really care about that time. But what I do care about is I need to keep a record of how long I have actually done this sanitization so that if someone comes back and says when and why, I can show them these records. So I need to track this digitally. So I'm going to start the skid pump. And you'll see what it's going to do is I've made it create an event frame. So now it says, okay, I've actually started the sanitization procedure. Now, instead of just saying, okay, it started and it ended, there's actually some information I also want to historize that's attached, that's only important for this SAN run, right? It's not important for any batches, anything, only for that. So I want this saved as an attribute of this event frame, okay? So what you'll see is I will put the discharge pressure, because again, you can see this in an SOP. And you know what? I'll show you that I've actually got a limit set in there. So I'll put 70 and 82. And I'll hit save. And it'll say, actually, you can't put that in. You're supposed to be between 50 and 60. So I'll go back and change that to 55. And this here is the operator. So what this is going to do is this is pre-filled out. It will pull through whoever your operator is running this and stamp their name as part of that event frame, as a data point. So now I can go back and say, okay, when I hook this up, this operator told me that these were the conditions. I have an auditable record of that event occurring. And again, I'll put my name to it. Again, customizable, which ones you want to have, which ones you don't. Then it goes back to another step instruction where it tells you, okay, this is how long you do it. Finish it up. When you're done with it, you hit save. And your last instruction will tell you, okay, what you need to do now is go back and resample to ensure that you had that reduction of bacteria levels, the whole reason you got into it, right? You save that step to acknowledge it, and you complete the workflow. Now, if we go back, you'll see here that we actually have, this is our sanitization run. Right? Look at the times. So it wrote what that information was. The other thing it wrote in here is if you look down at Wiffy skid, it tracked, excuse me, it tracked, click on that one. What your bacteria was out of spec, what the maximum was, what the recording of it was. It can count all that information in here as well, okay? So all that information is written to the event frame. You now would go back into your screen and say, I had to just take this sample again to make sure that I was clear. So now I resampled and it was 2, which is in spec. I save that, and if you notice, the button goes away. So the loop has been closed. Again, this has the decision-making process where anytime you have a flow chart for corrective actions, for troubleshooting anything in nature, it can get programmed in through a workflow. So it can make decisions in process based on what number is entered. For example, if based on the level of the bacteria, how high above spec it was, counted for how long you needed to run the test, you could have this say, this was your bacteria level, here's how long this test should be run, and it could show you on the screen and only show the steps that would be appropriate for that pathway. So the workflow really allows you to make sure that you have a close the loop scenario. And if not, it can kick you into a subsequent workflow for second level troubleshooting. So that's the first scenario we're going to give, is this Wiffy skid. Again, it's an integration of 3 tools. It's really the Pi core that allows you to track these points and put them in contextual manner in an asset framework and then visualize them. The next tool is eDataSheet, which again, for any of us who have ever had to put manual data into Pi or wished we would have had a log set in Pi, have thought about 1,001 different ways to do it. This, as you can see, is very quick and easy and natural as far as you do it. And the lineup between equipment and form. Equipment lines up extremely well to asset, and equipment types and groups can get connected with templates. So the same templatization that can be done in Asset Framework can be done in eDataSheet. And then the last tool is OpsTrakker. Again, a drag and drop tool that can be used to write a corrective workflow. The other nice part about it is OpsTrakker can also help you read and write and move data. So right now, we're only talking about, of course, connecting through to the Pi core group. However, if you expand that, you now think about all those silos that the Pi core group can bring into play. You can now start linking order information if you have an ERP system assigned. You can hook in equipment status because you have a CMMS or equipment management system in. You could potentially have a quality system like a LIMS or a Cupid system for quality management that you wanted to now combine together. You could have packaging information required. All those separate databases, all those silos can now be aggregated in Pi Asset Framework. And with OpsTrakker and eDataSheet, you can now add and then manipulate that data as well. So the next portion, I'm going to switch to another screen.
Wait, Kevin,
Yes.
before you move off that, on data sheet, could you show them how to enter in, if someone just wanted to enter in a comment real quick?
Absolutely.
Value.
Absolutely. So let me share this again. Sorry about that. And tell me if you can see my screen again.
Yep.
So making comments in this, also extremely easy. If you right click on the block, you'll see it says add comment. And with that add comment, again, there was no lower limit, so it doesn't fill in, but you can now add any comments as test for webinar completed workflow to correct. And this comment will now get written back to Pi as its own tag. So you now have, with the data point and the timestamp, the associated comment with it. This is extremely helpful, especially if you're working towards a logbook type of solution where comments are necessary for out of spec conditions, for closing the out of spec, for reviewing them, things of that nature. This really allows you to add it in here. The other portion, and we'll actually be showing this at Pi World, is another scenario where you can have pre-existing comments based on an out of spec. So if you don't want free form, you can have it as a drop-down list of this occurred. Here's one of the 5 reasons that you have to assign to it. Jack, did that cover what you were looking for there?
Perfect. Thank you. And that little red hash mark in the upper right-hand corner.
There you go. Lets you know there's a comment there, so you can edit the comment.
Nice.
And go back and view it.
Thank you,
Again,
Kevin.
like Jack brought up, the backside is all SQL. So if this is not writing to Pi, which is what you'd want it to do, you can see how each of these in a tabular format would exist. So this data, if you think about it as the tables, it's historizing it on these points that's how you can access it as well if you're looking towards thinking reports and things of that nature.
Okay. Thank you,
So the
Kevin.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Perfect.
Yep. So the next, and tell me when you can see.
Yep.
Do you see the portable tank?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So in this scenario, and before I get into this one, and this is really great because this is actually a pre-release version of this engineered solution. It allows you to both manually create and manage a Pi event frame. And so when I looked at that poll, there's a lot of people using event frames, right? But we're kind of at the whim of, well, what can I find as a digital trigger to connect that to? And I found, at least through projects I've worked on, that it would be extremely helpful if, well, what if there was a manual thing that occurred that I need to kick off an event for? Well, right now it's good luck, right? It's you can't, until we kind of found the way you can. So in this scenario, what we're going to talk about is we're going to be running a batch on a portable tank. So that's that portable tank 101. And what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to enter the start and end time. But the operator doesn't want to do it exactly when it happened. They want to be able to go and change, go enter a start time a couple of hours after it started and the end time a couple of hours after it's, and to be able to edit that. There's some data that we want at the start of the batch, right, that we need to record in the event frame that at the start of the batch. If you remember back our last scenario, it would be, kind of the discharge pressure and the temperature. There's also some data that we want to capture at the end of the batch. So, final pH and something else, right? So we want beginning of the batch, end of the batch time. So we want to write to this at 2 different times with an event frame. And we want the operator to be able to do this as they're moving around. The mobility portion of this is extremely important. And actually, that's one of the greatest things with these tools being integrated together in this engineered solution is the portability. Anybody who's worked with Pi Vision, you notice we're going from that platform. So anything you can build within Pi Vision and launch off of works extremely well in this engineered solution. And as you see, all they really are URL links. Now you can actually make these URL links become asset-based, right? So you can actually embed the asset in the URL, and then it will potentially, based on how you have your workflow set up, it can kick off an equipment specific and bring all that information over as key parameter information that you want pre-filled out. That's one of the nice parts about that as well. So you have some flexibility. So in this scenario, we're going to say we're on this portable tank 101 and we want to start a batch. So again, we're going to get pulled back into OpsTrakker, the web portion. Again, notice this is all URL based. So anybody with a laptop who has the proper permissions or a work tablet on the floor should be able to do this. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come up with the name for this batch. So I'm going to do batch, and you can see there's actually a mask on it. So if our operator forgets, oh, I forgot how to name these, and you want to make sure they name them the same exact way every single time, and you don't want to put them all down in a list. If you've ever had fun filtering and concatenating or separating spaces, then you know exactly what we're talking about. If you want that mask in there, and we'll do A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, 1, 2, 1, 3. And so I'm going to go to my next step, and it's going to say, wait a minute, you can't make a batch called that. It's already been named that. So there's interlocks you can put in here as well about whether, hey, is this a scheduled run where we look at a list of what should be running through this machine and do a verification, or as this does, it looks and says, hey, have you run this already? So I'll say, oh, that's right. I actually did run that one. What I meant to call this was ABC 5, 6, 7, 8. So it pre-fills in my description, a start time and an end time. Now on this start time, again, like we brought up, I don't want to be married to the fact that this has to start when I manually initiate it. I want to have control over this. So as an operator, yep, just got back from lunch. I started this up actually a couple hours ago at 11, but I wanted to make sure that it was running well before we started it. And then I got pulled away for maintenance activity. So now when I save this, right, this will actually make sure that this is the start time. And again, you can enter it with no end time, which is also nice because that kind of had to be the way you encapsulated data before was you knew where the start and end began. In this case, we can kick off an event frame, start it without having an end. So creating an in-progress event frame, which is extremely helpful, especially in this event where it may be going on and there may be things we want to record. So again, I'm going to go to save it. And it's going to write this information. And this is, it's going to tell me, hey, that password you came up for the demo is not very safe. So here's what we can do when we want to write event frame attributes. Here's the nice part about how this is really set up, is that there's not a setup that's necessary in OpsTrakker. The way OpsTrakker is knowing where to write these is actually based on the hooks, and I'll show you this later in System Explorer, but the hooks that are built onto these attributes. So OpsTrakker is actually looking for what can they write to, what are they writing to, not without any setup on the OpsTrakker side, all done on the asset framework side. So what we'll do for these event frame attributes, and if you notice here, I've got element attributes and event frame attributes. So I can actually write to different locations for this event frame. As you saw previously, I was pulling data through OpsTrakker. Now I can write back down through OpsTrakker to my PyHistorian as well. For this, I want them just assigned to the event frame attributes. I don't want it actually to the element because it wouldn't make any sense to the element. So I'm going to put 45, and this is showing that you can just put pretty much anything you want to record. It could be the date of your last maintenance activity for this. It could be how many runs since the last time that this batch was selected. It could be where the valve position was when found. So each of these are going to be written to the event frame attributes. And again, notice we're at the beginning of the event frame. So this is information we want at the beginning. Now, if you look down here, you'll notice that the check has a 2 next to it. This is a scenario where potentially you want to make sure that not just your operator is signing off on this, but let's say that your supervisor also needs to sign off on this for some security reason, audit reason, corrective actions, whatever it may be. That should work. There we go. So you have double signature verification. Again, like we talked about the configuration for this, you could do a whole bunch of stacks with this. Who's allowed to do what groups people are assigned to. This shows you the levels you can go through with it. Now, the next thing is this element attribute details. You'll notice it's already filled in. That doesn't mean that's what this information will be when we hit save if we don't change it. What happens is this is what is currently being saved in the PyVision screen. So you can look here, there's room humidity 8040.51, temperature. Those are all what we see here. So this is pulling from Pi. Now, the nice part about this is we can change this here. And this is just by default. If these showed up empty, we could make that as well. This shows you, so we can show you it's pulling right from the vision screen. So now if we wanted to change this, so actually temperature is not 85, it's now 105, and the inlet valve is going to be closed so we can run this process. And now I'm going to update those Pi positions, excuse me, those Pi tags with the new data. And again, this one has been built to have the supervisor agree that those numbers make sense prior to submitting. What it's going to do now is it's actually going to create the event frame and let you see, is this what we want to have happen? Is this what we want it named? Is this the start time? Is this the element? This allows you, before you go and start this event frame off, go, oh, actually, no, that's not correct. We never, finished this. It was a pause. I don't want to put this in. Whatever it is, you can go in and do this, right? You can get that review of it. And again, because if you're using this for tracking records, you may want to have multiple signatures on it, so there aren't stray orphaned event frames that have no reasoning behind them or were accidentally initiated. And we will authorize that. And once it sees that, it's going to look through and it's going to tell you this is what it just went and updated, was all this information. And it does it automatically. So I'll hit complete. And actually to show you the portion here of what it looks like for, oh, excuse me, on System Explorer, let me refresh this. And you can see, let's do start time. Oops. Here's the one we just created, 5678. So it's got a start time, right? It's got a description. And if we open it up, we can see that those attributes that we wrote in there, 45, closed, and that date, all get written. Now you'll see there's some other ones, integer, string, and Boolean, which haven't been written yet. Like I said, we set this up that you can write some information necessary for this event frame at the beginning and some at the end, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and with this event frame, with this batch, we're going to close it out. And then we'll come back to this so you can see how the system looks updated. So you can also see out here, there's the tank temperature at 105. You can also see it now. Oh, it's on a 7-day. So you'll see that jump up as well, right, to 105. So what we're going to do now is we finished our batch on this portable tank. And remember, we said it actually started a couple of hours ago, so it should end up a couple hours long if we close it out now. This also shows how you can go back and backdate, if you will, an event that occurred. I know a lot of times for downtime events on equipment, right? That's always been an issue, is you never want to put something in because you're not quite sure what you'll find out later. And then you have to link up comments so that they both make sense. This is one of the nice parts about this, is you can have an open and you can put an initial estimation of what the issue was and time to recover. And when you're closing at the end, say, actually it was discovered to be this and this was a replacement part used. Right? So it really allows you in that event frame to show that over time, other information will become available. And that's the information you want to capture, both at the beginning and at the end. So in this scenario, you can see we're ending this event frame. And what you do is you'll pick from any of the open ones happening, right? So you can see there's a couple different open batches according to this that are happening. We'll pick the one we were working on, the 5678. And it'll pull through your information. And again, it pulls through what I put on start time. Now I can go back and change that again if I want to. We'll assume that, nope, that's actually what I wanted. I did start it at 11 and I'm actually done now. I'm just going back and entering all my information. I'm going to save that. It's now going to show me the event frame attribute details that I've set up that I want to have entered here as well. And if you remember, there was a string, an integer, and a Boolean. So the string is test. And let's change that to true. We're going to save this information. And again, this is going to the end of the event frame. So it's going to be recorded in those open spots when we, sorry, typing and talking not always works. So it'll write it in as those other spots when we get to the event where, or the step where we close the event frame. Another thing we can do if we want to update this for the element, right, writing back to pi, is we can change the weight. So let's change that to 500. And actually, because we're on a different weigh scale, I don't have kilograms anymore. The new weigh scale is actually in pounds. So I want to make sure I'm recording this. So I'll save that. Oops. And my soup needs to know about this. Again, it's going to give you an opportunity to say, is this really when you want to put the end time for this? Because once you close this out, you can go back and adjust it. But if you close it, it's going to be information. We always really allow that operator that one last chance before fully writing to put that information in. We found operationally that anything that happens, just automatically, sometimes operators feel more comfortable with that check-in step. So in this, we can say, yes, I set this up the way I wanted to. My supervisor's here and agrees that this is what we want to write in for that last batch that was run. Oops. So we both agreed to that. So now it's going to go to the next step, which says, okay, I'm going to close this out. I'm going to add these event frame attributes that we talked about. And then I'm also going to update that element attribute detail. So we can see the element attribute details. We're now up to 500 pounds on that tank. And then if we go back to the event frames, and I'll refresh this, you'll notice that the Boolean changed to true, integer 976, and string was test. So everything that we wanted written to that original event frame is closed out, and we started that batch and ended that batch. And that's what I have for demos.
Hey, Kevin.
Yep.
Could you show a little bit about the hooks between the event frame templates and the element templates?
Absolutely. Yep. So the biggie as far as the hooks go, and I'm glad you brought that up, Jack, is you can see here what it's actually looking for is manual data entry and data reference none. So if you align each of these in that manner, then the way the engineered solution works, it goes and it looks for those and links them to the data for the OpsTrakker. So that's how you set up asset framework that works with this engineered solution, so that there's no need to make all the links on the OpsTrakker side. You've already built it here. It's just another way you can go. It's a way you can go in and build those hooks here, so you know what to pull through an OpsTrakker.
Yeah, so the idea here is that you can set up the properties on these event frame attribute, on these event frame templates, or on the element templates for the attributes.
Yep.
And then that establishes how OpsTrakker syncs back and forth with Pi when it pulls it in and when it writes it back out.
Yep. And there you go. Right. So manual data entry, the latitude and longitude are not, everything else is a manual data entry.
So what you're seeing here, this little piece that Kevin just showed, that's something that's going to be added to eDatasheet, so that we can just set everything up and everything gets maintained through Asset Framework. Okay. All right. Well, Kevin, thank you very much. Let me go back to my desktop here. Okay, great. So very good. So we had a few questions here. But before we do that, let's recap. One of the things we showed were event frames were manually, in fact, manually created. Manual data entry into Pi. Where manual data entry, and not only do we do manual data entry into Pi, but as the result of that, it triggered a corrective action workflow. Event frames can also be manually created, or they can be edited and completed as well. Okay, so if an event frame was kicked off inadvertently, you can edit it. You have a workflow for the data entry, for event frames, either as event frames, event frame attributes, as well as tag values. So let's look at some of the questions we had here. We had a few questions that came out here. Can cells in the eDatasheet be selected from a drop-down list, primarily for both entering in values as well as comments? And the answer is yes. Okay. Is the data stored in Pi after a supervisor's approval? The answer is yes. Yes, after a supervisor approves it. Again, when you set up the form, you can say whether or not you want an approval step. But if you don't have one, then it'll just go straight into Pi. But if you have an approval step, nothing goes to Pi until somebody approves it. Is there an option to object or to reject or approve by the supervisor? Yes, there is. Can we update the data in event frame, which is already in a closed state? The answer is yes, you can. Okay, if you have the authorization on the event frame with the security within Pi, okay, we could set that up. The way we did this here is yes, even though the event frame was closed, you could edit it. And the follow-up question of this, which was a logical one, is there an audit trail that is reviewable? Does it capture all entries and actions and the corrected user? The answer is yes. Yes, it is. OpsTrakker is baked in with the audit trail and baked in with 21 CFR Part 11. So it's that's baked into the product. Where will the e-signature information be stored if we want to retrieve it in the future? Right now, what we're doing is we're using this Pi as a system of record, where we're writing everything into Pi, okay? And Pi is the system of record, and the signatures attached to that are in there as event frame attributes in the system of record, okay? We also have them sitting in SQL on our end, okay? And we can push them to other locations should they be needed. But in this case, for Pi, we recommend we put everything into the system of record, wherever that may be, but usually, and that's usually Pi. And the electronic signatures would be stored as attributes to that event frame.
Here's some questions from a previous webinar that we had. Access management or signatures, are they linked to a customer's Windows Active Directory? The answer is yes. Can I simply enter event frame details like start time, end time, batch, etc., and refer to attributes from already existing Pi points to create an event frame? Yes, the values can originate from OpsTrakker or any Pi point or event frame attribute. Is it possible to configure workflows for events which occurred during the batch execution, example, alarms, audit trails, and events? Yes, alarms notifications can trigger a workflow. We actually illustrated this in a previous webinar, and we do in fact have a complete audit trail of the transactions stored in Pi. Can I modify the start and end time after closing the batch? The answer is yes. Event frame start and end times can be edited, again, with complete audit trail and sign-off. Are customized dropdowns possible in OpsTrakker for entering event frame attributes? Yes, absolutely. Customized dropdowns can be configured in AF and used within OpsTrakker. The event frame which can be edited or completed, does it have to be created by OpsTrakker? No, it does not. Event frames can be created by any source, event frame, generator, Pi interfaces, connectors, whatever, but once they're in Pi, they can in fact be edited or completed using OpsTrakker. Is the eDataSheet tool from Pi? No, actually, eDataSheet is an EIS product, but we actually developed this closely with AVEVA, and it's for manually entry of data into Pi. We had a pre-webinar solely on this product. Would this application be good to replace paper shift logbooks? Absolutely. Replacing paper logbooks is the primary use of OpsTrakker. We have many customers doing that today. And we split the batches and event frames into smaller chunks. Absolutely. This was developed specifically to address this issue. Can this be integrated with PASX Verum? Yes. OpsTrakker is typically used in conjunction with an MES like PASX. And any data source that's creating the event frame within Pi can be edited as well. Well, thank you very much. Let's proceed.
So I am going to ask you all to join us. If you're going to Pi World, please meet up with us. We're going to be at booth 58. Kevin and I will both be there. We're also doing a presentation with America's Styrenics, utilizing event frames with downtime reason codes to improve asset utilization. That's going to be on Wednesday, November 16th at 11:30 to 11:55 in room 2018 to 2020. We will send a recording of this and today's webinar to all those who attend, to all those who register for today's webinar, okay? All right, so thank you very much. Please, sir, take the survey at the end of the webinar. And again, if you have any questions about this or you'd like to know more information about this, please don't hesitate. Email me, jack@eisinc.com, and we will